Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good wherever you are. I'm your host, That Lit Astro Chick, the channel where we discuss the natal charts of writers, artists, and anyone else that I find interesting. I have been studying for an exam that's going to be in about 2 weeks, so I've been neglecting the channel a little bit, but I did want to come through and do one more natal chart for Women's History Month, and for today's natal chart, I'm going to cover the author Edith Wharton. I saw Martin Scorsese's The Age of Innocence when I was in the 3rd grade, and at first I was really in awe of the costumes, and the love story, of course, was later on. And then I had a chance to read it when I was in college, and I wish that she was still here because so much of what she discussed in her novels, so like her most famous one was The Age of Innocence, which she won. She was the first woman to win the Pulitzer for a novel, as well as The House of Mirth and Ethan Frome. A lot of those are still issues that we can cover today, even though I am nowhere near New York high society. I definitely do still see these play out in terms of the ways that we choose to socialize, how we choose a partner, how we choose the people that we're going to be friends with and what use they are, as well as the ways in which we implement strategy. So I wanted to just read very briefly from her Wikipedia page before I get into her chart. I don't want this video to be too long because I actually do have stuff I got to do today. So from her career portion, per the Wikipedia page, it says, despite her not publishing her first novel until she was 40, Wharton became an extraordinarily productive writer. In addition to her 15 novels, 7 novellas, and 85 short stories, she published poetry, books on design, travel, literary, and cultural criticism, and a memoir. 1873, Wharton wrote a short story and gave it to her mother to read. Stinging from her mother's critique, Wharton decided to only write poetry. While she constantly sought her mother's approval and love, she rarely received either, and their relationship was a troubled one. Before she was 15, Wharton wrote fast and loose. In her youth, she wrote about society. Her central themes came from her experiences with her parents. She was very critical of her work and wrote public reviews criticizing it. She also wrote about her own experiences in life. Intense Love's Utterance is a poem written about Harry Stevens. So now let's go ahead and let's get to her chart. Edith Wharton was born on January 24th, 1862 in New York City, New York. First thing that I notice about her chart is the fact that she's got a man-eater aspect. So that means that her sun, which is at the 4th degree of Aquarius, squares her Pluto, which is at the 8th degree of Taurus. Now, Sun square Pluto in a natal chart, it's typically going to point to someone who will have ongoing issues of power and control, specifically when it comes to the 5th house matters because the Sun deals with the 5th house. And this is specifically going to be about like men, children, friends to a certain extent, recreation. There's always going to be a sense of a power struggle in terms of like power and control, which something that I definitely see as being dominating themes throughout her life. Now, her Sun and her Mercury are conjunct, and those are both in Aquarius. And as I've talked about before with God, who else have I covered with this? This seems like this is like a very common aspect for writers. With Toni Morrison as well as with Gloria Naylor, they have this exact same hookup in their charts as well. And this is going to produce someone who's going to be a genius, especially when it comes to innovation and speaking about things from a more technical and detached perspective. I think that this could have been one of the aspects as to why, even though she was a part of high society, she was more along the fringes as opposed to being completely enmeshed and enveloped within it. And from her works, as well as works about her as well, she really did have a problem with this type of high society because it doesn't afford women the opportunity to make it on their own. At this time in history, women were required to be married because they were still seen as property, no matter what the class status of the woman was to be. And that was something that she really did speak out against. It also makes sense because she has her moon in Scorpio. Now, of course, this could be a later degree Capricorn moon. But with the placeholder that I have in my chart, it's a Scorpio moon. And this is actually running conjunct to her Chiron, which is in Pisces. And that's at the 0 degree. So as I've read before about Edith Wharton's biography, she is somebody that had a very difficult relationship with her mother. And I could definitely see that because she does have that moon conjunct Chiron in Pisces. Chiron, as I've spoken about before, it's one of the major asteroids. It would be like the who hurt you, is going to refer to somebody who most likely is going to have a very difficult relationship with their mother, where there's going to be a lot of suffering as well as a lot of betrayal. And I think that she felt that creatively because her short stories were originally rejected by her family. I definitely understand this aspect as well, unfortunately. It also, because that Chiron is running in conjunct to her moon, it would put her on the place of being an outsider because it is an exact conjunction. So she couldn't help it as far as being somebody who was going to be perceived as being an outsider to this group of people, even though being a part of high society is something that she was born into, as well as being something that was going to be a part of her life. And I know that this is something that she struggled with because she also has her Jupiter conjunct to her Saturn in Virgo. Now, Saturn in Virgo is going to refer to somebody who, when it comes to karmic lessons in their life, they have to focus far more on their self-worth. These could be people where they could actually be kind of messy. They might be lazy at some point in their lives. They also might be very unkempt, as well as struggling with issues around their self-worth and as well as around their autonomy. And this is something that she would have been forced to master in this particular lifetime, because she does have that Jupiter conjunct to her Saturn. So do I think it was something that she mastered? I think that she did in some ways. I think that it was much more focused on developing her self-confidence as well as being more reliant on herself, as opposed to being reliant on the way that other people have seen her. I also do want to add that because she does have her Chiron and it is running, looks like in a quincunx to her as well as to her Jupiter. This also could be a reason as to why she felt like she was an outsider and like she didn't fit in. Another interesting opposition with her chart is that she also has her Saturn, and it's running in opposition to her Neptune in Pisces, as well as Jupiter is running in opposition to Pisces as well. This could speak to someone who has the desire to be more of a wanderer for her past lifetime, as opposed to what she doing before. However, she is somebody who was very well traveled. She spoke a lot of different languages. And Pisces, it's also going to refer to voyages, especially because it's going to be at its home with that Neptune influence. When I first looked at her chart, I could tell that she was somebody who most likely has gone through a divorce. And this would have been highly controversial for the time that she was born into. But I see that astrologically because of two things. The first one is going to be she has her Venus in Pisces squaring her Uranus in Gemini, and that is almost an exact square. Venus square Uranus in the chart, it's going to unfortunately point to a divorce. And she also would have been somebody who would have had a lot of suitors, I believe, because she also does have that Venus in Pisces. And Venus is exalted when it's in Pisces. However, she also could have found romantic relationships to be a sacrifice because it's at that 12th degree. And the 12th degree in astrology speaks to a sacrifice. The next reason as to why I think that there could have been more discourse and strife and maybe she would have preferred to have remained single is because she has her Venus squaring her Mars, which is that 12th degree of Sagittarius, so another almost exact square. Venus square Mars in a chart, it's going to refer to, because I was talking about this with another natal chart reading that I covered last week. Venus square Mars in a chart, it's going to refer to a conflict in terms of the person that you might get with, and then there is who you really are. So to take Edith Wharton's chart, for example, Venus in Pisces, when she initially could have gotten with somebody, And I don't know, they haven't looked at the page in a long time, the page or her autobiographies. She would have been looking for someone who most likely was going to be able to take care of her in some way, because a Pisces in this position is going to speak to provision. She would have initially gotten with somebody for the desire to have a very peaceful relationship initially. And she also was going to be looking for someone who was going to be very creative, where there would have been a collaboration, as well as having a self-sacrifice in some way that could have gone on with this relationship. But Mars, I always speak to Mars as in like, you know, who you really are, like keep it real. And because her Mars is in Sagittarius, this would refer to putting a lot of her energy more towards voyages because of that Jupiter influence, as well as her education. This also would have meant that she would have had a very explosive temper and possibly would not have been able to really about understanding the reasons as to why she may have had that temper, or maybe she just didn't really care. And I say that because she does have her Mars running in opposition to her Uranus and Gemini. Another interpretation of Mars in opposition to Uranus is that this could refer to someone who maybe initially in their lives they would have had more of a focus on getting with people, or relying more of their desires of who they wanted to be dependent upon what other people saw in them, as opposed to who they actually really were behind closed doors. So those two aspects, the Venus square Mars as well as the Venus square Uranus, tells me that she most likely did go through a divorce at some time in her life. And it looks like, according to her Wikipedia page, she was married before, but she did get a divorce. And I'm pretty sure that that would have had to have been very, very difficult for her, because she would have been somebody who would have gotten a divorce during a time in which that would have been really controversial for a woman of her station. And it looks like this is starting to go on for a teeny tiny bit too long. So I want to talk about some other aspects that I see in the chart. The next one that I want to talk about is going to be Jupiter squared Neptune. There could have been something that maybe she could have been hiding about herself, specifically when it comes to how she was around other people. That could have been something that would have been maybe like what she would have wanted to hide. Mercury square Pluto. Perhaps she was somebody where she didn't get along with her siblings, if she did have them. She also could have had issues with people within her immediate surroundings. And I think that would have been obvious because of what she chose to write about in like the Age of Innocence, as well as the House of Mirth. There also could be an aspect where she could have possibly felt like there was a sacrifice on her end, or maybe it could have been associated with tragedy because that Mercury is at the 13th degree. The number 13, it tends to unfortunately be a very unlucky number, but it also can be responsible for receiving breaks that you didn't earn. So this could possibly have a come up aspect for her. Mercury trining her Uranus in Gemini. She could have, this also does speak to her being very ingenious in terms of the ways that she wrote and the subjects that she spoke about. And I think the last aspect that I want to talk about is going to be her Sun trining her Uranus as a positive one. Sun trining Uranus as well as Neptune. So this could talk about somebody who could have maybe had a lot of lucky breaks within their someone who would have been a very creative person, and also somebody who would have been very different from others, but she would have been okay with being that different from other people and letting other people know that she gets to be different, they get to be different as well. Last aspect that I'll discuss is going to be her Sun is also conjunct to her midheaven, which is also in Aquarius. And typically speaking, when people have Sun conjunct to their midheaven, it's going to point to someone who will be very successful in this lifetime. It could also point to somebody where, because it is in Aquarius, there's going to be a lot of drastic changes in terms of her income. So that's what I want to talk about as far as those. I do think that she was somebody where in this lifetime she was supposed to be more focused on self as well as preservation and running her personal life like a business, because she does have that North Node at the 2nd degree of Capricorn. I think the last thing that I want to discuss when it comes to her chart is going to be her Lilith. Now, the Black Moon Lilith, it's like your Mars plus your moon, and take it on crack. And her Black Moon Lilith is in Taurus. Taurus, of course, in the zodiac is going to refer to possessions as well as material wealth. There could have been a scare on her part when it came to poverty, as well as the inability to enjoy beauty that would have been very important to her. She also could have been someone who could have been very possessive when it came to the things that she owned. However, I do believe that this Black Moon Lilith in Taurus could have also had a lot to do with what it is that she chose to write about. So that is going to conclude my reading on Edith Wharton. I said I wanted to get a little bit of a faster one out this particular time. And as I said before, for closing remarks, I am currently studying for an exam, so I'm going to be not quite in a space to where I can advertise doing natal chart readings for people. However, if you're somebody who really does enjoy these natal chart readings and you really do want to have your chart read, please feel free to reach out to me. My email information is going to be below. Reach out to me with your information and I will send you my rates. I wish you a great day, and I will talk to you in the next video.